This is the Midnight Robber Damian Whiskey.
Hark! Drop your keys and bow your knees and call me the Prince of Darkness, a criminal master. For when I stamp my feet and snap my teeth, I shall cause a great disaster. It is people like you, not my name, I claim the fame from whence I came, whether it is by wind, storm, or hurricane. From the day my mother gave birth to me, the sun refused to shine, the earth started to tremble. For the age of 1, my toys were cannons and machine guns. From the age of 2, miraculous wonders I began to do. From the age of 3, I had anxiety to rob, murder, plunder, leaving men, women, and children to suffer. From the age of 4, my name was marked with bloodstains on every door. From the age of 5, I was wanted by the KGB, the FBI, the CIA for the wicked deeds I've done, the miraculous wonders I've performed. From the age of 6, I was known as public enemy number 1, 2, and 3. From the age of 7, for a man to fight with me, I had to be a double pistol fighter, nerves of iron, muscles of steel. From the age of 8, ladies and gentlemen, my grandfather's life was taken. His treasures were stolen. And from then, I became a midnight robber. Anybody here have a cell phone? A laptop? No. Tablet? No? Let me tell you a story. Greetings in the name of the great digital divide, the connected, interconnected, disconnected, and reconnected. I am the great and omnipresent Midnight Tech, the victor, dictator, and merciless leader of the real, the unreal, the virtual, the subliminal, of everywhere and nowhere. The greatest trick I ever played is to prove I didn't exist. I am the ghost who walks, the slave master who never talks, a puppeteer without strings, a criminal mastermind with a notorious billion victims. This is the technological advancement of midnight robbery and the political economy. You see, Bill Gates and Tim Berners-Lee went to my school of midnight robbery, from the ballpoint pen to the microchip, calculator to the rocket ship, biometrics, the clone of sheep, a society in head first and knee deep in what? Technology. A term so far removed from its Greek origin, techne, that have twisted, manipulated, and perverted into a tool of control and domination, not just over the technocrats, but your very thoughts, social behavior, and relation. You have developed an objective personality. Your very life as an individual is binary, guided by performance, objectives, stats, and proficiency. Glitz, glamour, lights, camera, action. This grand spectacle is the inversion of life, a simulation of reality, a hyper-reality. In this global technological oligarchy, the youth are caught in a perpetual gaze, pew, 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 a maze with a means and end mentality. There's no way that you would ever discover that I am your master, making each and every one of you my slaves.
All right. The old fire station is a little bit smaller than the Savannah stage, right? So, just big round of applause to Damian Whiskey, the Midnight Grill. So, why do we have a midnight robber here this afternoon? As you may have noticed, looking through the program this year, well, it's not the first time we've had a midnight robber at Bocas, but this year in particular, we have a whole series of events that focus on some of our indigenous art forms, from masquerade to calypso to pan. And what I'm particularly interested in with the robber is how that whole idea of the midnight robber, of robber talk, of the speech, you know, the kind of poetic speech that the robber recites, how that might influence or inspire what other writers, other kinds of writers are doing. Because writers who grew up in Trinidad grew up with this, with calypso, with the Pierre Grenade, with all of these traditional characters who use lyrics, who use words. So how do our writers, who are known as, you know, page writers of poetry, of prose? How are they influenced by what the Midnight Robber does? Well, we've invited 3 writers to come this afternoon and share their version of Robber Talk. Don't know how, I haven't heard the pieces, I'll be as surprised as you. I don't know how closely they will cleave to the traditional Robber Talk or how far they will depart. They've all dressed in black, and 2 of them have whistles, so they're at least trying. So they're going to all come up here and do their pieces, and then we're going to have a little bit of a conversation. So I'll introduce them all in one go so I don't have to keep hopping up here. First, we're going to hear from Rhoda Bharath, fiction writer, essayist, political commentator, author of the book, the 10 Days, I always want to say the 9 Days Executive, I always get it wrong. The 10 Days Executive and Other Stories, published a couple of years ago. Then we're going to hear from Colin Robinson, poet, newspaper columnist, essayist, activist, whose book of poems published 2 years ago, was it, Colin? 2 years ago, You Have Your Father, Hardhead. And next we're going to hear, we will hear from Vahni Capildeo, author of many books of poetry. The most recent one, which we're launching here at the festival on Sunday, is Venus as a Bear. So we're about to hear 3 writers give their version of Robber Talk. Let's start with Rhoda, and a big round of applause to welcome her.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. The first thing I should say is Nicholas sends me this email and says he wants to do Robber Talk, and the first person he thought of was me. So I wasn't sure if Nicholas felt that I was a bargain or I just only work late in the night. Either way, I guess I could take that. I am not a poet, and weirdly enough, of all of the forms that have been influenced by West Africa, this is the form that I am least familiar with and least comfortable with. So, here now, give I strength, yes? Anyhow, it's called #DunceTrending. Because I think a lot of people know me now for my social media presence more than anything else. I do not, because I am going to rob you without a whistle, right? I will come upon you and be so familiar to you that you will hand me the thing without me even having to ask you for the thing. That's how tech works. So let's go. I was not born, I was manifested, brought into being by a commitment to ignorance so deep-seated that I am a constipation of galaxies that dove past the depths of the Mariana Trench, plunged into the abyss of time, surfed past the Earth's molten core, dodged the imaginative sparks of creation, and tore a hole into the womb of the mind, which led to the toxic hemorrhaging that miscarried me into the world that was yet to be formed. An endometrial womb rife with tumors that oozed and leaked fluids and gases so sulfurous and acidic that anything prolific was neutered by it. My gestation period was as fleeting as the semblance of a thought, quicker than the leap across a synapse, but my life will span eons. My name is Dunce. You can call me anti-logic, and laugh and wiggle, and look around and giggle, and think to yourself, what is there to fear from Dunce? Dunce is to be scorned, parodied, lampooned, like a 5 days with Kumti on a vacation in Venezuela claiming to be marooned. Dunce is a joke, a madman baying at the moon. Dunce is a jester, a clown, a fool. Dunce is Watson Duke, a harmless buffoon. Or so he would have you think. Dunce is the perfume of laughter that covers the stink of my effect on your ability to coherently think. It is the same aroma that renders you helpless in the battle against sharing news that is fake and senseless. Yet share it you will in defiance of logic, because what name rational when the urge is to share it and send it and post it and like it and tweet it? 10,000 views later, a viral phenomena. Fuck facts, evidence and statistics. Fuck facts, stats and evidence. Those are useless criteria. In the card game of life, where only a feeling can matter, who holding up Trump and who is really the joker?
Stop and bow and feel pleasure. I am the darkness of freedom, the bastard of Lot, the grandson of Onan, the horn child of Ham. I am Caliban Lanyap. I have the whip to suck salt out your pillar of wounds. Before the dogs of the Spaniards and the shitholes of the Atlantic, before Victoria Corset, before independence get loose in Babylon and Gundong in Fort Rupert, before Rampasad swish into courtroom, before pretender ever mock or worry, I was born. I have no conception. I am original. I rip up the book of Leviticus and wipe myself with a page of Deuteronomy. I am older than that. I am storm and tempest. I grind down the teeth and the gums of the Orinoco, before sea flowed to the serpent's mouth, before the syphilitic, arthritic, loose man give this island a bad name. Empty your pockets of shame. Hand over your fundamental chains. You cannot resist my force. I overturn galleons. I rearrange syllables in hills. I uncage lexicon. I am elision and foreclosure. I jangle prepositionality. I am the locative case. I draw out your great house at midnight. I hang white men naked in a silk cotton tree. I am everything you imagine or hoped for. I ransom you kneeling. Release your treasure. Call my nameless.
Invader, I am the darkness that invades your mind. You are the darkness that is mine. In the time when all your gods was a mist kissing the ass of the black water that covered the face of the world with all the green dolor, I was the astronomical antimatter. Where the angels glide and collide with me, I smash up the angels to eternity. Before the earth rise up as God's son and daughter, I dry up God's tears and eat up their laughter. I was the hurt that hobbled the angel foot. I was the rot that spread in the rainforest root. Whoever tried to count and plan out night and day, minute and hour, I was before nanosecond and nanofirst and nanny wine and nanny of the maroons are infants to me, for I am the error that recurs to infinity. I am the nerves that push the mad president's hand to push the button. You understand? I am the last words you forget to utter. When you negotiating the last chance to save your sister or your mother. I am the hostility in the hostage situation, and the hostage situation is where I lead every nation. I have no genealogy. I am the play with no rules and real corpses, the universal unbalance of gains and losses. Tremble before me, the stranger invader. I take every shape and no shape. I am obstacle everlasting that tricks those who want to be free. I destroy time. I am the horror you cannot keep away. I am the sentence with words of snakes that bind and rape up the judge on Judgment Day. I am the gramoxone love song at the wedding of the doctor. I am the child bride hymen beneath the fingernails of the lawyer. I am the coat hanger in the cupboard of the priest wife room. I am the terrorist vampire from the Lapiro's tomb. I erase your face where you're seeing race. There is nowhere to hide because I am inside you at a cellular level, splitting your atoms in a nuclear evil. I am the mangrove's inside-out womb. I bring the foreign submarine to honeymoon under your waterline. I give your sons a submachine and make them feel how it have plenty bullets, so they use it like a love machine. It is futile to hide. I am death multiplied. I am as small as the smallpox in a blanket. You feel you are big, but you only big like bullshit. You have nowhere to hide. The stranger invader owns your field. My steel boot tramples down your football pitch till it becomes a parade ground for every bitch who sees race. I come, I seize, and I erase. I am curare on an arrow that a parent brings to school. I am plastic spikes in ocean fish that you swallow like a fool. I am the chlorine quiet in the family murder swimming pool. I drown you in a quarter syringe of sea. Do not forget that you belong to me. When Columbus men landed holding their bright weapons up, I was waiting for them in the form of dew and rust. When the French and the Dutch and the Portuguese and the Spanish and the British took away your language, I grew strong. I had ease eating your tongues. I am the fatigue that waits in the cheap aeroplane and causes it to crash. I am the biological vector that mash up and turns the suicidal farmer's harvest to ash. I am the force that shatters the astronomer of freedom's telescope to splinter in his eye. I am the widespread lack of education that blind your comrade and make them cry. I am the expert in outing off your people's hope. I am the top Freemason cardinal of robbers. I elect and poison and beget every robber pope. At the age of minus 666, I met the seraphim and cut off their pricks. At the age of minus 7, I cast down heaven into the labas. At the age of 0, I forged my own cutlass. At the age of 5, I took your life, and your life, and your life. Your lives were sweet, and zombification was complete. At the age of 9, darkness was all mine. From the age of 10, I operate as an ageless Robert Wen. There is nothing you can give me to make me forgive. Not your gold and your soul. I already have them stacked up in my offshore currency. Which of you dare challenge me?
Well, on Sunday, end of the festival, grand finale of the festival, I'll come here and I'll do my robber talk. I'll write it by then. So I'm going to invite the three writers to come up here on stage. I'm going to see if Damian can fit through the door again. So let's have a little bit of a conversation about what this is. What is this thing? Let's see if we can get him in. But meanwhile, writers, please come and take a seat.
All right. Well, I'll bring the hat and just leave it on the stage. Yeah, well.
So I don't think Damian will come up on a chair on the stage. I'm not sure that will happen. Maybe he'll sit on the edge of the stage. How does that sound? And I'll sit here.
Check, check. What?
Okay. And maybe Damian can just perch on the edge of the stage. Can you do that? I'm not sure you can get in a chair. All right, so first, another round of applause for our four Midnight Robbers. So, as I said at the beginning, the Trinities in the audience all know what this is, but not everybody in the audience is a Trini. So, Damian, as the expert, tell us, in your words, what exactly is a Midnight Robber? What is this tradition? But also tell us what drew you to it. Why do you do this? Why do you do this particular form of masquerade?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I've been performing as a Midnight Robber for the past 29 years. And in the true form, in the true sense of the art form, I was actually forced to be a Midnight Robber when I was 10 years old. I was a nerd, teacher's pet, and there was a competition for Midnight Robbers in the then West Indian Reference Library. And my teacher felt that, I was an introvert, so she needed to force me to do something brave. And so I went. I couldn't tell my teacher no. So I went, and we had, it wasn't as elaborate as this. It was just black clothes and a garbage bag cape and some copybook skulls and bones and so on. But I was so frightened that when I went onto the stage, my feet started to shake and all the skull and bones, I just fell off. But I placed second in that competition. My father then forced me to enter another competition, that Carnival, and I had to compete against the judges of the first competition, along with some other Midnight Robbers. I placed third in that competition. And I was asked to join the band by then Andrew Puggy Joseph and Brian Honore, two of Trinidad and Tobago's greatest Midnight Robbers. And I've been performing ever since. So, the Midnight Robber, what do you all think the Midnight Robber is? So I perform under the sobriquet, the Midnight Griot, to pay homage to the griot, the African storyteller that came from the west coast of Africa, and he is the predecessor to all of our oral traditions. Trinidad and Tobago is very special in terms of culture and creativity and so on. So we have this griot coming through the slave trade everywhere in North America, the Caribbean, and so on. But right here in Trinidad and Tobago, he did something special. We have this thing that we like to boast, we like to brag, but the society at that point in time, they were slaves. So this is the society at which they spoke out against. They were actually speaking against the treatment that, that was meted out to them, against the slave masters and so on. And so that's what gives the tone of the Midnight Robber's speeches, Robber talk, and so on. So he's a villain, but a villain with a purpose. So the robber has evolved. Back in the day, the language, the robber talk, and so on was more about crimes, train robberies, drowning a man in a teaspoon of water, that kind of stuff. But it has evolved over the ages. And so now I didn't have an opportunity to hear you guys. Sorry about that.
We were better than you.
That's what we're talking about. But I'm pretty sure that would have been in the vein of where the Midnight Robber is heading towards now.
Yeah. And of course, so the robber talk is literally the speech that the Midnight Robber delivers, but metaphorically now we use robber talk to mean any kind of bombastic, boasting, threatening. So politicians, so badge on, so policemen, so ordinary people. I'm sure there's lots of robber talk going on at this festival behind the scenes. What, you've heard something I didn't?
You're going to tell us on Sunday?
So I'm interested to hear now from our three writers. All born and grew up in Trinidad. Vahni now spends much of her time in the UK. But, three writers who not just born and grew up here, but who In some ways, I mean, you're all Carnival participants in different ways. I know this because I've played in bands with two of you. I've been, Rhoda and with Colin, and Vahni is a fancy sailor every year for Carnival. So, like many people in Trinidad from all professions, writers here to play mass involved in Carnival. And so I'm interested to hear from your own perspectives, how do you think that kind of cultural context, those kinds of influences have shaped what you do as a writer? Maybe you can start, Rhoda.
Okay, I think, the bombastic, grand charge, badjonism aspects of it definitely feature in the prose that I write, the creative prose that I write, and even the statuses that I put up on Facebook from time to time. I will say this, though. Sitting down and converting it into verse was far more challenging than I thought. To be able to prepare for today, I spent the last 2 weeks listening to Bungie Garlin. And that was, once I remembered, okay, I have this thing to do for Nick. So I'm there and I'm like, okay, how do I get prepped for this? I went online, I listened to some of Damian's stuff online as well. So the current Midnight, the guy who is the robber here, I listened to some of his stuff, listened to some of Bungie, and felt like you all were going to get something like in the middle of those things today. Because I guess for me, I felt like the cadence was slower than I am accustomed to even speaking on a daily basis. Because I speak very, very quickly. And so getting myself into the mindset of something that was that much more deliberate and had that slower pace and had that somber tone, I had to focus a lot just to get that somber tone, because I think generally the tone that I tend to go for is something that has a little bit more levity to it. And so having to prepare for today forced me to take a look at the art form, forced me to take a look at what would be the origins of the art form, and to think a little bit more about the level of thought that has to go into being bombastic.
And Colin, Colin did not make that hat specially for today. I'll have you know he had it at home. Right? And I'm sure there are plenty of Trinities in the audience who have pieces of costumes at home, and I could actually turn up in full regalia as a midnight robber without having to go out to buy anything. We all have bits and pieces at home. So Colin, you've obviously worn that hat somewhere before, but I also know that I think in your writing, but also in your, not just your poetry, but in your newspaper columns, in that kind of writing, you're also very much influenced by Calypso. So how do you think, same question as for Rhoda, how did growing up in this context, surrounded by these things, seeing things like Midnight Robbers on the road for Carnival and hearing Calypsonians perform at Dimash Grand in the tents, how do you think that's shaped you as a writer, but also as a thinker? Because I see the influence of it on the way sometimes you formulate ideas in your newspaper columns.
Say more about that.
You don't think? I think there's a kind of a Calypsonian's playfulness sometimes in the way you get into topics when in your newspaper columns. So I'm not talking about the poems now. In your columns, where you write about current affairs in Trinidad, about your own activism around LGBT issues, but also just around the idea of citizenship and what that means. There's a sort of a dance that I see you doing in the sentences, the way you approach topics. Like you almost never come at anything straight on. It's always in that kind of Calypsonian sort of weaving of then the chorus tells you what's really going on. Yeah. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, but that's a lot different than the Midnight Robber form. I was really challenged by this when Nicholas asked me to do it. I didn't want to say no.
Same. You felt the pressure too?
Yes.
Okay.
And I didn't know how to enter the task. As a poet, I've not been focused on form. I mean, the forms kind of infuse themselves into the work, but the deliberateness of form isn't part of my writing. So it was a huge challenge for me, but I think that the rhythms and the cadences and the structure of the language is a part of what we live with, and they're the tools that we work with. And it's more the subtlety of how that weaves itself into what we do in verse as poets, that there are all these influences around us. I started writing as an Afro-Saxon, which is sort of the household that I grew up in. So my kind of engagements with Creole forms in Trinidad has been more of a deliberate exploration. I did not write my first Trinidad Creole poem until, 2014. I was writing in standard English all the time. So it was a very challenging experience for me, and I would be very interested in hearing the audience feedback on the range of presentations that you heard.
Vahni, I know you've been obsessed with the figure of the Midnight Robber for a long time, and I think, tell me if I'm wrong, you actually had a robber perform at a book launch of yours once. Didn't that happen in London?
Yeah, that's correct. My very beautiful and intelligent mother, Leela Bisundat, who is at the back of the room there, grew up in Sangre Grande, and she remembers seeing midnight robbers which would go in the streets and also in her father's shop. So when my mother ran out of stories to tell me, which was often because I used to refuse to eat unless I had a story, she used to do things like enact the midnight robber. So playing a midnight robber was something I grew up with. And when I had the launch of my second book on Draining Sea, which was in London at the Trinidad High Commission, I knew I did not want it to be the kind of launch which is like a no alcohol awake, or rather high alcohol awake. What should I say? Like a baby sham awake, where people mutter into the microphone and they could as well be reading the IKEA catalogue, if you know what that is. Or should I say, like, counting the gold one stamps. I didn't want that, so I looked for some carnival figures, and there was a midnight robber, a woman who could be a midnight robber, and somebody who could be a Perro-Grenade. And I arranged with the High Commission that the robber would come up in the lift and enter the room through a concealed door and disrupt the crowd, which I think worked very well. Then I left the Midnight Robber aside for a while, except for enjoying the performances at Bocas, for example, from John Stallmeyer, who's an eco-robber, and obviously as well from Fédon Honore. And then when I was working quite a bit with Martin Carter in Cambridge, I decided to do a dramatization of Martin Carter, which would stage his poems in a variety of contexts and through a variety of styles, reflecting the heritage of our caste, which was very diverse. So, for example, there was somebody who'd grown up in Hong Kong, but white British in Hong Kong, who became like a colonial schoolmaster, teaching Carter badly to two people who overturned the classroom. And one of those people was a Welsh-speaking girl from North Wales who took up the tradition of Hoyle, I think it is, which is a sort of mad preaching style of delivery. And I was slinking around in what people thought was just dark clothes, but then I started to deliver lines of Martin Carter as if they were robber talk. For today, I prepared in 3 ways. I listened to the mighty Shadow, who has been my obsession since the age of 2. I spoke to Fédon Honore and John Stallmeyer on Skype, who were very generous with their time, about a month ago. And I had no lunch, but I had a large glass of rum cream for tea.
So, Damian, I want to ask you a kind of a flip side of that question, because I've asked the writers how, growing up in and around Carnival and traditions like the robber tradition, how that's shaped them. But you, as a practicing midnight robber, and apart from learning from the tradition of the great ones who've come before you in that tradition, what have you learned from maybe from writers, from novelists, from poets, or from actors, from people in other creative professions who are not necessarily doing what you do, but that you've been able to take something from that's been able to shape what you do?
Wow. I think that's pretty easy as a Trinidadian. You pull from everywhere. So there's the formal training that I would have received younger, but just growing up and in school, where you go on the taxi stand right here in Woodford Square, there's no way, the music, even the spoken word poetry right now, I still learn from the holla. Yeah, so there's such a plethora of influence and a wide base that you can pull from. And if the robber talk doesn't have, there's a broad framework, but it's not specific, so it's limitless.
What would you say are the key, sorry to take over from you here, what would you say are the key,
Mocking pretender.
I can't help myself. What would you say are the key tenets to the thing though? Because when in me preparing mine, I was trying to figure out, okay, what's the structure for this thing? What are the key traits or features. So, like, if I had to teach it to somebody, what would I tell them?
Yeah.
What
What must absolutely be in it for it to be a proper robber tour?
Delivery. Delivery is 80%, because you could mostly robber talk rhymes, right? There's a rhyme, but it doesn't have to, you know. But the way it delivers, the tradition is in bombast and that villain approach to the situation. The delivery there must be an attack. The audience must feel threatened, you know. And the material, you always write from the perspective, well, for me, I always write from the perspective of a villain. Always write from, so even if you want to tackle any social issue, you think, well, for me, you think about how to invoke thought, but from the negative side. But the way that is delivered, you kind of have some introspection.
Vahni, Colin, anything you would like to ask our real live Midnight Robber sitting in front of us?
I think I want to push you a little further. I mean, in terms of what the specific poetic conventions, I mean, there's the origin story. Walk us through some of the actual specific techniques in the narrative and how you tell the story.
All right, so there are periods of influence. So coming out of slavery in that particular era, it's along with all the devils and demons. So you have to understand the entire Carnival story, along with the devils and demons and so on. You're trying to use your ancestors in a sort of way to frame a story to regain power in a situation, right? But then, I mean, even Trinidadians would tell you, which is wrong, they'll tell you that the Midnight Robber is influenced by the Westerns and so on. And it's, you know, it's a type of cowboy and that kind of thing. But what really happened is in that spaghetti Western era, the lyrics within the Westerns, it influenced a lot of these speeches that the robbers would have been writing at that time. So you can actually pinpoint the influence as you go through robber speeches throughout the eras. Brian Honore, he started off as a Calypsonian who became a Midnight Robber. I think from the time he picked up the art form, he forgot about being a Calypsonian. And he brought that spirit of his social commentary to the art form.
We have a Moko Jambi school, but how is the tradition being? Sorry?
Isn't it my turn? Oh. Sorry, I'll come back to the Moko Jumbis later because the Moko Jumbis are a little bit too sexy. And it's true though.
Midnight Robbers are not sexy.
No, that's why I'm saying they're a little bit too sexy to come on the same stage. Something terrible might happen. But what I wanted to ask is what is the place in which the Midnight Robber can operate now? Obviously, this is a closed environment in a literary festival, which is the dissemination then of ideas that will go out into wider communities across the world as this is an international audience. But in the streets, when you're playing mass, you don't necessarily see those pools of quiet.
No.
So where do you operate? How do you take your message and your rhythm?
It has been a struggle. We struggle for space within our own carnival environment. When I grew up in the mass, there's something called a guile. It just naturally happens. So you go throughout East Port of Spain, wherever robbers meet, which doesn't happen anymore, but there used to be bands of robbers. And when we meet, the audience would just naturally form into a circle and you give. So we spoke here today separately, but robbers actually battle, lyric for lyric, in the speech. And they would throw money in the circle, and whoever the audience decides was the better Midnight Robber at that point in time, you take the whole, you know. And even the art form in itself, once you stop people and you share that verse with them, part of the tradition is that they actually pay you so that you wouldn't, you know, actually do what you said. Yeah, but there was that thirst when you roam through the streets of Port of Spain in carnivals of yesteryear, at first for people to hear you, to hear lyrics. But now we are drowned out by the music, by everything else, even the airtime.
What did you want to ask Colin about the...
It was a very similar question too. No, I was just asking about how we're keeping the tradition alive, what's actually being done to nurture it.
All right, so there are two things. Formally, the National Carnival Commission has a series of workshops that they run during Carnival time at schools, but it's really based on the individual coming to the commission, speaking to our principals. So it's a whole coordinated effort, but on behalf of the individual themselves, to have a workshop that runs for about 6 weeks in the schools. So it's not too large and too wide. And then we try ourselves to organize workshops as well. Sometimes we do like a one-day visit to schools. This carnival, I've made quite a few trips around the country, going to schools and introducing the characters to the children and so on.
Now, so we started a bit late. I don't want us to run too late. And I know maybe some people in the audience want to ask questions. I do just want to say one thing, which I should really have said at the beginning. Now that we're talking about support for the art form, I just want to acknowledge that this event and other events focused on our indigenous art forms at this year's festival are supported by our Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts. So we're very grateful that they see the value of not just supporting Carnival through the NCC and through the actual festival, but through things like this that give us a chance to talk about these art forms and what their influences are. Are there any questions in the audience? Anyone in the audience? We've got one right in front. Okay, a mic is going to be on its way to you momentarily. Here it comes. We'll start. Okay, so I'm keeping my eye on the watch. We're going to do lots of hands and not enough time. We'll see how many we can. No, this gentleman. Sorry, this gentleman here first, and then if you know. Right.
This is for Mr. Whiskey. How do you go about putting together the costume, like the physical appearance of the Midnight Robber? What goes into that? And how often do you go about changing that persona?
All right. So it actually changes, just like our Calypso, it changes by the year. So your costume really is supposed to go along with the entire theme of whatever that presentation is for that year. Of course, you could change it a few times during the year, but usually yearly. A Midnight Robber must have a hat, a broad brim hat. Doesn't have any particular style per se, but it must be a broad brim hat. And he must have a cape. The cape, if I could show you.
Yes, it is amazing, isn't it?
All right. Now this is a simple cape, but the cape really is supposed to depict some part of your theme of your presentation. So must have a hat, must have a cape, must have a whistle. The rubber whistle is very important in allowing the audience to know that, because there's a whole tradition of how he approaches and what he does and how he speaks to you and that entire engagement. And the whistle starts the whole thing. Right? There's a particular whistle. This was the police back in the 1940s, 30s, 20s, and so on. When they entered the police service, they used to get a whistle like this. Yeah, and this is the whistle that the robber works with. And you blow it up. It also has a particular way that you... The particular way that you blow the whistle as well. And all that is part of the tradition.
I'm actually sorry I didn't wear my cape this afternoon for this event.
Mitchell always wear a cape.
If you want to had a question.
No, my question was about the whistle, so
Oh, okay.
it's been answered already. So
Okay.
let me pass the mic on.
There was a lady there, right there, and then maybe we can take...
She's right now, behind Jared.
Right, and then we'll take the one in front, and then... Okay.
Right, good afternoon. Mine is not a question.
Okay.
Mine is simply to commend NGC for this festival and to question whether or not it would be coming to other parts of the country. For instance, Point 14, next week or so, Point 14 will be celebrating its Borough Festival. Would have been good to have some form of the literary festival down there.
Well,
Something they can look at for next year. it would be possible this year?
Well, we don't even need to look at it next year. We can look back, because we've actually done in past years, we've done a Boca South, usually in October, November. We did a Boca Central, so 3 years in running. We've also done a Boca Tobago. And our children's storytelling caravan, which is part of our children's festival, every year goes around the entire country, literally the length and breadth of the country. It's far, from Mayaro one side to Carinage on the other. But you're absolutely right, and I hope that, our Port of Spain festival is what people know us for, but Bocas works year-round around the country, maybe not such high-profile ways, but it's a perfectly good point.
I'm aware that in Central, because I am from Central, but I'm throwing it out here now so they would look into 14 and the borough celebrations.
Got it.
Right? Thing is that NCC, as the schools, it do bring the national characters to the schools, and the workshops are held with the children and the character himself, whether it be the Midnight Robber, the Pyro Grenade, whoever, etc., that comes to the school and train the children. And after that, we look for where else. So we need to look into the where else. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a question here, right in front.
How it feels to be a midnight robber?
How does it feel
That's
to
a
be a
lovely
midnight
question.
robber? And then, so after we answer this, okay, let's answer first.
So it's a perfect question from you, because it was around your age that I actually started, and I had the opportunity to grow as an individual through performing this particular brave, bragging, character. And I started off not wanting to speak in public or speaking in a large group and so on, to being able to perform for hundreds and thousands and so on. And I enjoy every day and every opportunity I get to be a midnight robber. I feel proud of myself. And in going to schools and dealing with children, I get a joy of the amazement of being, I go right back to when I was your age and seeing the midnight robber for the first time. So thanks.
Okay. One last question, and then we're going to hear a final performance from Damian before we end. So here we go.
My question is to Damian. You mentioned the changes within the tradition. Is there anywhere where we can get an anthology, or where we can read the different performances over the years?
Is there a library of robber talk somewhere in the world, or an archive? Where do we find that?
Well, we are on the compound of the National Library. I had that journey because I started off early on in life just performing, and you learn from the masters, so you figure you know where you are. But I became a student of the art form. There's a section in the library here that you can go to, and it's not robust, but I could send you to one book in particular, Carnival by Earl Hill, right? You would have actual robber speeches leading up to 1956. So you get to see what it was like, the types of bands, the type of robbers, because this is the most popular version of the robber. There were actually several versions of the robber up until the 50s, 40s, 50s. There were versions. There were bag robbers, train robbers, all kind of different types of robbers. But the robber you see now, the robber you see me perform today, is the most popular version that's through the evolution that remained and stayed. So you'll get a good bit of information right here in the National Library.
There's also YouTube.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So there's no more time for questions, but Damian is going to send us off. Are you going to put on the hat?
Yeah, sure.
He's going to put on the hat, and he's going to give us a proper send-off. And then if anyone has further questions they'd like to ask him or any of the authors after his performance afterwards, I'm sure he'd be very happy to talk to you. So let's give him another round of applause to get him started while he puts on the hat.
Now let me take you back to another century, in the days of Sir Walter Raleigh, in search of El Dorado, that golden city. Now the Midnight Robber is known for his verbosity, but for this one, you would have to help me. When I raise my hand like so, the response is El Dorado. Now let me go. Nice. My grandfather taught me to rob, murder, and plunder a tradition like no other. But I decide my own destiny. This is my legacy. To run the rat race, so now I set the pace. The price of oil is falling because my students of midnight robbery are arguing. The economy crumbling, people bearing, the recession coming. But the money still spending, which is why I'm posting #win. When this midnight robber goes with your life, money, milk, and honey, you are left doomed in the continual search for. Get rich or die trying is the mantra that have the young men killing. Corner versus corner, brother versus brother. You could burn tire for bad road on the People TV, but never to protest crime or gangs in your community. Because you too searching for the children. The children growing up messed up for so. Video games, social media. Because mommy and daddy busy searching for. I make $1 gazillion a year. Budget after budget, time after time. No administration could ever eradicate crime because they too searching for. You see, I control the lyric, so the semantic is my tactic. Change the word gold to goal. Now the whole country in a frenzy, a drone mentality, no sense of originality, adopting the capitalist system of the Yankee. You're spending money on things you don't need because you're searching for. A costume used to mean something. Well, I like my costume. Yeah. But now on the streets of Trinidad and Tobago is bikini bottom, breasts, and beads. The children trick-or-treating right here on the shores of Trinbago because culturally we're searching for. El Dorado. You see, El Dorado is nothing more but a farmer's trick, a carrot on a stick. You keep reaching and reaching, everybody searching and searching for that special something. Money, house, car, land, rum, and parties. Now the new almighty. But there's no way you could ever know that it was I, this midnight robber, that sent the world in search for. El Dorado. Tell me when all you find it.
That's the Midnight Griot, Damian Whiskey. Thank you. Round of applause to him. And our 3 apprentice robbers, Rhoda Bharath, Colin Robinson, Vahni Capildeo. You can ask them outside what their sobriquets will be when they start to do this. So just want to let you know that the next event in the fire station, which is going to start in about 20 minutes, a very exciting book launch. Savi Naipaul Akal's book, The Naipauls of Nepal Street. One of the most exciting books we're launching at the festival this year because it gives us an inside look at one of Trinidad and Tobago's and the world's most famous literary families, a point of view we've never heard before. So that's on at 5 o'clock. So you've got until 5 o'clock to come and chat up the robber, the main robber and the 3 apprentice robbers. And then we're back in here at 5 for the book launch. Thank you very much, everybody.